I'm turning it on already.
You switched it on?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so Mike, you better hurry.
Just as long as your big punum's there.
Yeah.
Big, meaty.
Is that in the way? Are we good?
We're good. Cool. We're live. Things are good.
Yeah, you're good.
Things are sexy. Stay out of the limelight there, Rachel.
What?
Nothing? You're doing a great job. Great. Can't wait to
Do what I
replace you.
can.
Ready to roll? Almost.
1 second.
Okay.
I am ready to go.
He's got to double check something on his phone.
I'm good.
Everyone sees you're holding it up. Everyone there is watching you holding it up.
So I'm good at holding things up.
So annoying.
Yes. Show over.
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
Welcome back to the 101, the Small Business and Entrepreneur Show. Easy enough to say. Brought to you by Lincoln Wallace. It's Michael Morris, and I've got my two compadres with me, Madison Gillespie. Madison, how are you?
Good. Thanks for having me again, Mike.
And Andrew Leachman. Mandrew is here today,
Mandrew.
beard and
it.
all. Boys, I thought we would get into a topic that's big in the news right now, but I don't want to talk about what's the allegations. I want to talk about how to fix it. Okay, ways that Lincoln Financial, for one, could fix it. The sexual harassment allegations that we keep seeing, and it seems like it's every couple hours something new has happened. NFL Network had an issue which I shared, which somebody said, I can't believe that Warren Sapp could be guilty of anything.
Shocker.
But
Nobody's really surprised there.
again. But when you're looking at these things from a business perspective, I think we're all looking at TV ratings and replacing hosts, and everybody looks at how disgusting that behavior is. What is the answer when you run a company? Okay, we were talking in the lobby about Mario Batali, who stepped away from his TV show and his restaurants, but they're still going to stay on the air and they're still going to stay in business. What do you do from an HR standpoint, or if you're working with a company, what do you do to fix that?
I mean,
Andrew, are you afraid to touch the subject?
No.
He's an
Not at
HR
all.
nightmare.
Yeah, I mean,
No,
literally, you're the worst person to ask
I
this
disagree,
question first.
I disagree wholeheartedly with that.
Yes, you're an angel.
No, I'm not an angel, but I think that it obviously starts at the top. And I think there's definitely a lot of things. We've been seeing this now for how many years now? It's on multiple different levels. You can go all the way back to the Penn State one.
Right.
That was something where that was 30,
That was
40
an
years ago.
institutional control
Yeah.
issue.
Going on for
And that's
years.
Joe Pa ignoring or disregarding very obvious things that he was told, and kept on doing what was best for the program and for himself. And I think until people start kind of considering the ramifications of how serious this stuff is, you're not really going to see a change in attitudes. Until now that we've got social media and people are basically giving evidence of their behavior instead of it being hearsay. There's solid evidence of how people are behaving that we're now going to have to. It's going to be interesting. I don't really know. I guess I don't know what or how you would start with some of these giant institutions like with Good Morning America. I think with Matt Lauer.
That was the Today Show.
Today Show, excuse me. Yeah, I mean with something so big and so many working parts, I think you're going to see companies just completely step away from people.
Well, I think what you're
very,
saying is
very,
valid.
very zero tolerance.
When you're talking about
Should be.
When we were talking about Penn State, that was the first time I'd heard the term institutional control violation. So when you're looking at it from a business, I mean, it doesn't matter how big. I think a small business, they say, is anything under 1,000 people, which sounds very odd, but we've got a couple clients that they consider themselves small business, and they do, $30 million in business.
Right.
But they're considered small because there's a certain kind of cutoff level.
A threshold for sure.
But when you have that many employees, you can't police every single one, right? So, Madison, you had kind of mentioned that there are ways that you can kind of offload that or get a third party involved to kind of handle that. What kind of a mess is that, or is it the way that people should go?
Well, I think one of the biggest problems, now that this is making national headlines, this has been going on for years. It's a cultural thing.
Right.
You give guys power, money, and fame, and they're going to use it to their advantage. And unfortunately, that's just kind of the world we live in. But I think the biggest thing is it's happening not just on a national level, but it's happening every day.
Right.
in small to mid-sized businesses.
multiple times a day.
Right.
Okay, wait. So I want to
Multiple
ask you
different
this. Because, Andrew, you've worked for several companies. Madison and I worked in the media for a long time. You've seen it, right? I mean, you've seen or heard and you've known it's happened. We've all been there and said nothing about it, right? So it's not like we're better than anybody.
Yeah.
But when you, Madison, from the media perspective, how many times did you tell a story like that was hearsay or someone told you right to your face and you're just like, wow, I can't believe how effed up that is?
Yeah.
But it becomes like folklore. It just keeps getting passed down and it doesn't get addressed. So it's not like we didn't experience it, but it wasn't our thing, so it's not my bag. I have nothing to do with it, right?
Right, yeah. I think it comes down to how far can you take it, because in the media business and the media culture, a lot of it is, joking around and ripping on each other.
Well,
and
it's high school with a paycheck.
Well,
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
If
exactly.
you go even back to the really good show on AMC with Mad Men.
Yeah,
If you go back to that, that's media. That's
Right.
what, if you saw how horrible.
Oh, that
they
is
treated their
exactly how it
wives
is.
and
Absolutely.
everything was going on. So if you fast forward that and nothing has really been addressed, just it's got quieter and been more and more buried until now. You keep having people coming out, so there's strength in numbers across the board. You know that women aren't going to feel like they're in the wrong, even though you have some people always questioning every time a woman says something. I just don't think this is some sort of scheme.
Yeah, it's not a
nationally.
witch hunt.
No. I think it's obviously there's so much smoke. There's absolutely a lot of fire.
Well, that
We've
guy
seen
that
this-
wrote the show, by the way, also got called for sexual harassment
Oh, nice.
For which show?
for Mad Men.
Oh.
Matthew Weiner.
Shocker, right?
So, in case Matthew's listening, thanks for listening, being a fan. But you shouldn't have done what you did.
Jerk.
But when you're looking at it, I remember watching it, and people had said, I think my mom was the one that's like, oh, that's so fake. That can't happen. I'm like, and then Matt Lauer, it's like, yeah, exactly. So when you have that kind of situation going on, there's one HR person, right? So you have to bring those claims to them. In a small business setting, though, like you're dealing with it every day. Someone's worried about their bottom line. This is a big deal.
It is. I mean, I look back at businesses that I've worked for, or even on this national scale. So the person that turned in Matt Lauer, they went directly to NBC's HR, which I'm sure, I don't have proof of this, but I'm sure other people have done the same thing. So here you have this guy that's making $20 million a year.
Right.
He has power, fame. He has a show. He's been doing it for 18 years.
We have to find out where in the world Matt Lauer is. That was the thing.
Right. I
Yeah.
mean, like Carmen Sandiego.
Yeah.
Um,
Shout out to Carmen Sandiego.
Yeah, miss
Go
you.
on.
Where are you? No, but I think internally, I'm sure that there's been other instances that have even been presented in this situation, because where there's smoke, there's fire.
Absolutely.
The issue becomes then, how are they handling it? Because now that there's multiple news outlets, Hollywood, even politically, I think that having stuff internalized can you have a huge network like NBC, and these things are going internally to their HR department. Who's to say if they're protecting themselves at that point?
Well, because they're corporations, I think that makes it a more difficult issue, because like when you're watching a film, every movie that you see is its own LLC, like its own small business. For that 90 to 120 days, it is its own thing. When you're a corporation, it is so big that I'm sure there are thousands of allegations that don't get reported, but when it gets to that point, how can a corporation, that they can protect themselves better in a small business? If a guy who has a small trucking business, if something happens there, I could shut your whole thing down.
Right.
So we know what's wrong. How do you correct that?
Well, what I've seen in some of the businesses that we have worked with, a lot of, depending on the size of the company, they have internal HR, which is really common in corporations. And what we've done, with Lincoln Wallace is we have our own HR department that comes in and works as an outsourced HR department. And what that does for these smaller businesses, it allows them to get an opinion from somebody that's not involved with the business.
Level neutrality.
Right, and doesn't have the relationships with the people internally. So there's no bias. It's strictly, this is an HR issue, or
Kind
this
of a
is
third party independent of the whole thing. You're kind of Switzerland.
Right.
And just view it and kind of make corrections. And I think you have to start with it absolutely has to be zero tolerance.
If there is a zero tolerance policy, though, let's back up for a second. If you bring in a third party, they have no dog in the fight. They are paid to do that task. how do you convince somebody they need to have this third party? Because I can tell you this, we've had this conversation, what Lincoln Wallace does, doing everybody's back end stuff so you can concentrate on the front. Do you know, the difficult situation for me is they do all this back end stuff, and it's kind of like a new, what I want to say, it's a new field. Because typically people didn't offload it as I had an accountant, a doctor, a lawyer, and that's all I need. We get to this point, and you guys can provide an HR solution. How willing are people to go, yeah, I totally want to take my hands off this and let someone else do it?
I think it's situational with business owners. We have some clients that we work with that handle it themselves internally and enjoy doing it and are good at it. And they're able to not only manage them from a either owner or boss perspective, but then also provide the HR side. And I've seen that work before. A lot of times, though, when we come across clients that are struggling in that area, they know it, and they're looking for somebody.
It's pretty prevalent.
It
We
is.
have issues. I mean,
Well, you worked somewhere that did not have an HR. You might have been the HR guy.
I was the HR. We actually, my very first, I guess, serious job would have been I ran an indoor baseball facility in Reynoldsburg, and my family owned it. I was the general manager. I had like 3 employees, and then I just had to deal with everything myself. Pretty much, I just did everything, from cleaning the toilets to
Writing checks.
yeah, writing checks, renting fields.
At the
But
same
we
time.
had
Yeah.
we did have
Same
We had
phone
a-
call.
yeah, it is. We had we had a few women that worked for us, and then we had I think my brother and an instructor. We never really had any issues with it, but again, so small, they were kind of like family friends. So we never really encountered anything. We never had any reason for an HR department because we only had like 2 or 3 2 full-time employees. So it was never a big deal. And then my previous position.
Did you work with all guys in that? It was all
Yeah.
men, right?
Yeah. So at one point they were theorizing they wanted to try to get the Blue Jackets girls to come in and be like canvassers, and
Because that's always the first thought. We need business. Let's get a girl in a skirt.
With their ice skates still.
yeah,
Right.
right. Well, to go around knock on doors, and that just seems like completely not safe for the first part.
Right.
And second, if those girls were in the meetings I was in, it would have been a nightmare. The things that were being said. Now, fast forward where I am with Fiesel, we have the office is pretty much all women. So
The
it's-
internal structure is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have our administrative assistant, the head of admin, production. It's pretty much everybody but the 2 accountants are all women. And then the head of sales, the CEO, and obviously the owner. But
That's kind of how our structure was in media, right? I
Yeah,
mean, it seemed
very
to be
close.
the brain center always seemed to be.
oh,
more female.
absolutely. I mean, all of them are dynamite. They're all incredibly good at their positions, and I'm thankful to have them running their positions. And I think that maybe right there is the first thing of changing the culture inside of a company and building respect for the people who are. If I don't have them, I can't do my job. My job is a lot harder without them. So maybe making sure that the people that are doing the stuff that are behind the scenes in an office are respected enough to not have these situations come up.
Well, I want to run this by you because one of the things I just saw yesterday was the push for equal pay, and I know that when you're looking at a business and saying profit and loss, how do we do this? You don't. I mean, it's fair to say you don't look at somebody by gender or race or anything like that. It is task, right? If they are great at their task, the reward is higher.
Yep.
So there's a push for people for this equal pay situation. As this, and Alec Baldwin was talking about this yesterday. So if you're pushing for equal pay, that doesn't really take away this issue of the sexual harassment, or you had said power, right? If I have power, I have money. Even if people are on an even playing field, because Matt Lauer's making $20 million, but I can't remember that Savannah Guthrie is making 15 to 20. I mean, it's not that big a gap. Do you think from an HR perspective that is what's going to balance things out, a pay scale evening?
I think the misconception with, I don't know enough about women's pay compared to men's pay nationally, but I would say a lot of it comes down to, if you look back culturally for the last 40, 50 years, I know in my own home with my parents, it was kind of a known thing that my dad worked, my mom stayed at home. So you have this culture of men advancing in their career more than women, just from the simple fact that it was kind of a known thing to stay
Right.
back. And so I think there are situations where women are being underpaid and certain corporations and just different situations that involve that. But I also think there's this advancement of men in the workplace for a long time.
Well, like the Roger Ailes type of thing, where they work their way up, but then they own it, and then it's kind of the old boy network, which is kind of getting phased out.
It is, and I think that's what we're
Absolutely
seeing is it's getting phased out, and now we're having women move up in power, and they're seeing these things that men are doing or have done to them, and now they have a voice because of the platform through social media or through other people speaking up. And I think it's just kind of opening up this wormhole of
Well, it's
What's-
like you've got Pandora's box, and now we open it, and then we're like, if we could just get the lid back on it, just for a
yeah,
little
just
bit.
shut it for
Because
it's getting
it
old.
literally is on Facebook. I forward this all the time when I see these things because I first of all I can't believe the names that are out there, but because it has to do with media and that's my love, right? So when I see this, I'm thinking, you worked your whole career to get to this point, right? You're some guy that went to a higher university, gets all the way to the top, the pinnacle, and then you bring it all down because you can't control yourself in the workplace.
Yep.
So, when it comes to HR issues for small businesses, it seems to be that's the biggest challenge. It's not getting paid for the work. It's not doing the work. It is the people that you've employed. You can't go back and say, boy, I wish I wouldn't have employed them, right?
Right.
It is harder and harder to get rid of a bad employee. If they've done something like this, the sexual harassment piece, you've got to get rid of them immediately. But then there's steps to do that, right?
Right.
They have an attorney, you have an attorney. Unless they just walk away, what do you do with them?
We haven't dealt with a situation that's been sexual harassment related, but I will say that not just from an HR and taking the sexual harassment or the inappropriateness side, there's a lot of money that's being lost by companies in the way that they hire people, but it's just kind of an interesting topic when you start getting into HR because it can go so deep and trying to find that line of what is okay and what's not okay, and then it gets pushed too far. It's just an interesting topic, and I think a lot of it's situational, but I think a lot of it can be fixed if you put in the right boundaries within that company.
Let's take a break here because we've been going for a while, but when we come back, we'll get right back on this topic. As nice a topic as this is. You're listening to 101 brought to you by Lincoln Wallace. We can run it back if you want, or if you think we've kind of killed it, we can go into something else. We can talk about.
Go into that.
We've got like 9 minutes.
Okay.
Go
Okay.
into.
I like that. What are you talking about?
What I want to do is I want to kind of, if we have 9 minutes left, I don't want to waste it because it's a big topic.
Okay.
So what I want to talk about is bad employee, like your situation where you had pain in the ass you were dealing with,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like it.
and how did you? Because we can talk about like funny story. The first 3 people I hired literally didn't show up after a month, like each one, like no call, no nothing, and I found Rachel at the gym. You know what I mean? And she's been with me
Was she
for 2
lost?
years. Yeah,
She doesn't even know how to work.
I had a map of the stars, and it just went to my office.
She could kick my butt.
Yeah.
Probably mine too.
But what I
Yeah,
want to
all
talk
of
about is you have dealt in a situation where you've got these
Just a roadblock after every roadblock, man.
right, but I want to talk about the guy on the street who has to go through, and it's like, dude, you guys are wrong, right? You got to battle
Yeah,
that.
I mean, I got all kinds of stuff I could talk about.
Whereas you're going to talk about it from this thing of here's the steps to get rid of somebody. bad.
Right. Well, and so my sister is has her own private HR company. She does all the HR for my brother-in-law's company, and then she's branching out and doing work for us. But her entire philosophy is that it's a culture. Like you're creating a culture that just breeds either inappropriate. I mean, my sister's off color too. Don't get me wrong, but she comes in and looks at the people more as the human side of it and why are you here? What makes you want to be here? And how can we help you grow? And then kind of eliminating all of the bullshit.
Right.
That is tied into, well, she said this, she said that. No, this is a culture. It's a privilege to work here. If you want to work here, you can. And she just nips it in the butt. There's no, you can still have fun and all that. But she's told me some nightmares. I mean, it roughly costs $10,000 to $15,000 for each new employee you hire, whether they stay 90 days or not. No matter what, you spend 10 to 15
I want to
grand.
get
Wow.
It's fact. She was breaking down the last 6 people she's hired and let go that were in 90 days.
She works at some big company?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they have about 100, I think a little over 100 employees, but she was saying roughly between $10,000 to $15,000.
We have fewer than 100 here, and we've done probably about 3, I think 3 that I remember that I went to, like, workshops where you told, okay, this is sexual harassment, this is inappropriate behavior, et cetera, going back like 15 years. I remember attending the first one of those, and I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I have a lot of common sense. But even I got busted once. I told a dirty joke to a former female employee who's now passed away. She and I had a great friendship.
It was so funny.
We telling, not X-rated, but R-rated jokes to each other. She would come up and tell me.
Yeah, exactly.
And there was another gal that worked here part-time who was in the same office, and she went to HR. My boss came to me, and I said, no problem.
Yep.
It's done.
I think that's the biggest thing, is to kind of put yourself in somebody else.
So if we wanted to tell jokes like that, we would do it like outside of the...
Get the sweet joke. Come outside.
Get a little notepad.
Yeah, we go outside. Or we do it outside.
I got 2 good jokes.
We do it. Both were fine with that because
But it
we
was
both
that
had
other
common
person,
sense.
yeah.
And we're like, I even apologized to the other person. She said, well, no problem, but I didn't know whether you guys realized. And I said, no, we didn't. Sorry.
Well, that's the thing. I think people don't ever, or a lot of people don't want to consider how it makes other people feel.
Shut up, Andrew. I don't care about your feelings.
You got to make
because you don't
you got to do a lot more than that to even bother me.
Especially at a bigger company where you've got thousands of people.
There, we got to be,
and you're working with people you don't really know on a personal level, so you got to behave.
Yeah,
right.
And then, well, I mean, like even in my previous stuff, it was this big thing. All the guys and all the salespeople would come in and rip on each other and make fun of each other and tell off-colored jokes, and you just never knew who was going to walk by. And
there was a friend of mine. She used to work at a local radio station here, and I'll tell you the rest of the story when Facebook Live is off.
And then we'll put Facebook Live on and tell the story.
about some of the things she experienced there.
Oh, I'm sure.
Oh, boy.
Not sexual nature, but of a racial.
Oh, I believe it.
Yeah.
That's another one.
Power 107. It was a
good stuff.
It was a long time ago. Probably about
Krauts.
15 years ago.
I was 3.
15 years ago. That's in World War II.
Yeah. No, you were 5.
I was 5.
There you go.
Back in '08.
It was just during World War II. Yeah. I was around. Get off my lawn, you kids.
Yeah.
You stupid bastards. All right. You ready?
Yep. Ready to roll. Here we go.
Welcome back to the 101, brought to you by Lincoln Wallace. Madison, I want to get into something you said earlier. You said culture. A business is a culture.
Right.
Can you kind of define what you mean by that? Because you said some things when the microphones were off that are very important. But when you're building a culture of anything, what does that mean in a business sense?
So to start things off, I think culture is kind of where I would say more the millennial generation is going. If you look at some of the bigger companies that are out there like Google, Amazon, Apple, and in their corporate sections, they've really created a culture of freedom and kind of work hard, do what you want, but we're also going to give you this freedom. And they've created a culture, not just in the freedom aspect of it, but if you look at these bigger companies and kind of see how they've structured it, they've really done a great job with kind of connecting with the millennial mindset and where things are going.
Well, like at Google, they have those gaming rooms and gyms and showers.
You can take a nap. You can take unlimited vacations.
But I've not heard of, and I could be wrong about this. Maybe it's not been reported, but it doesn't seem at Apple or Google or anything you've had these claims of sexual harassment or a bad workplace, because they're kind of taking Andrew's living room and putting it in the workspace. So why do you want to go home? You can
play Call of Duty for 3 hours.
Get your stuff done and whatever.
Which is different than the typical workflow that any of us have really experienced, because it was always go to an office, this is what you're doing here.
9 to 5.
Yeah. But they've got people that'll stay there till 2 a.m. because there's a place to sleep and it's safe and everything you could want is here. Watch TV if you want, which is very odd to me, because as that next generation is coming, I'm like, I would have stayed in that building like year round, because why would I go home?
I wouldn't even get an apartment.
Yeah, I wouldn't be in a relationship. I would just be there constantly. I'd be like, Steve Jobs, you're the man. I'm staying here forever.
We could probably make that work.
But as far, Andrew, you worked in a place where your culture, I was there, and it was not a culture. It was like 10 cabs showed up at one office at the same time, and nobody knew each other.
Well, I think if you go back to Google and Apple, a lot of those companies, before they started optimizing their growth, they started optimizing their sales and how they're selling things, what they're getting done from inside. So creating a good backbone of people that want to work for them, and then growth has just been exponential for them. When you get into somewhere where, where companies are trying to just optimize growth and sales at the same time, and not trying to focus on one direction, because I don't think you can do both sometimes. I think you need to pick a direction. And they were just trying to sell everything they could, move as much money as they could, get revenue as much as they could, growth as much as they could, before you have basic fundamentals of a business in place. They literally wanted to go 60 miles an hour, second year of business, when they didn't even have wheels on the car.
Well, also they all had that kind of entrepreneurial spirit about
Absolutely.
It. It was, this is our concept that's going to change the world. Like Google, Apple, it wasn't, here's how much we're going to sell, here's how many widgets we have, which is, I think, a lot of people that are entrepreneurs, the sales part, they think they can figure that out. It's, here's my product, which is the key. That's the reason we do the show, is so people can hear. It's not easy. I mean, it's 7 days a week, especially when you get started. It's long hours. But if you believe in it strongly enough, you'll
Absolutely.
get there. Versus revenue only, because you've got revenue only media companies that are owed billions of dollars, but they're still operating. But nobody believes in that overall concept. It's, I believe in my commission or my salary. I have to save that, and you won't grow that way.
Well, I think that was definitely a situation where it's kind of the opposite. They had sales figured out on how to actually do it, how to bang on doors, $2 million first year guerrilla marketing. No money in marketing. That's really good.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
That's really good.
Especially what were your margins?
But it's
60%
the combustion
profit?
rate of doing that without continuing to stack on top of that, without figuring out how to properly have somebody run your production, where you're scheduling your jobs, getting your crews organized, getting your supplies delivered. Full-time job, by the way. That's not a couple days a week. Also, somebody managing all your sales teams. Also, somebody working your back office with your payroll, closing out stuff with insurance companies, collecting payments from customers. So without doing those things and trying to grow into new markets and start new branches in different parts of Ohio, their third year, or I guess really full second year with sales, is it's going to be interesting to see. I think they're going to make money. They're going to make money. I'm not even worried about that.
But the money part isn't the aspect that.
But
I'm talking about is.
But growth is going to eventually be crippled.
But that culture that you were in, you guys literally, you could tell that you knew each other, but no one would look at each other. Like you guys there was contempt in that room, and I don't know if it was they were all busy or whatever, but you could tell there were individuals in that room. Versus when you build a culture, it doesn't matter who's in the room; they have the same. Yeah. Yes, the buy-in is
it's
the
a little bit of
thing.
Being loyal to who you're working with, and whenever I start working somewhere, especially my current job with Fiesel and with my boss Matt Sherry, I actually tagged him and Madison as two of the biggest people this year that have helped me.
Oh, thanks, man. Thanks.
Yeah, you're third.
Good.
You're third.
He's not
You're there.
Top three.
Top three, and the rule is two. I had to pick two, so I can't break any rules here. But it's one of those situations where everything that I was told was going to be given to me, or not given to me, but that would come down the line, has happened. I have no reason not to think that. As to where, if you flip that, and every time you've told me something, either the terms change when it's time to pay up, or nothing happens, and I have to bring it up, and I have to keep. So the deal had changed 10 times in 7 months. It's not great. It's not a great way to build loyalty. So it kind of speaks to what's going on there. And every time the situation changed, it got less in favor of me and more in favor of the company. And for somebody, like Madison said last week, if somebody who's going to disvalue what I think I'm worth and not appreciate it, I'll go elsewhere.
Right.
So I think if you have companies that don't appreciate their assets, you'll lose them. So I think long term, it's going to hurt them because of it's always being centric on who's the ownership making money over everything else.
Right.
I want to go back to the culture aspect. I think we brought that up quite a bit. I was actually talking to a client a couple weeks ago. We were talking about her employees and kind of how she was managing them. And I asked her, what was your biggest challenge? What are people today wanting when they take on a job? And she goes, they want respect, they want freedom, and they want a good working culture in the business. And I ask her, I go, do you provide that? And she goes, once I sat down with all my employees and asked them what the most important things were, and I actually got to know how they want to be kind of not dealt with, but I guess just respect was the biggest thing that came up.
How they want to be treated.
Treated, right. Yeah, and I think consistently she kept hearing respect and freedom, and I think that's kind of where things are going within a lot of these workplaces, especially for the millennial culture, is they want an environment of respect. And I feel like
people want to feel valued.
They do.
Well, here's the difference. What we're talking about is how you feel.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be job security was the biggest thing. I want to
Money's
take a
not
job.
everything.
That's true. That's a good point.
Now
How
it
do
is
you
how
feel?
I feel.
Right.
Right. And that's how the new culture is, and that's why we're seeing a lot of this. It is, I feel bad about what happened to me.
I hate
Again,
my job. I hate
yeah.
going there. It's,
Or I hate how I'm treated.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
what you're seeing are people that are tired of the embarrassment or what has happened to them and how they feel internally.
Mhm.
Doesn't matter if it happened 20 years ago; it's still coming out now. You know, so I know that was I didn't think that was a horrible topic, but I thought it was something we had to address because people are forgetting just because they're celebrities or athletes, they are all CEOs of their own company or they work for major networks. This all ties back. If you're a small business, your culture is the most important thing that you can work on.
Yeah, and just because it's
your
celebrity.
culture is your brand.
It's,
Right.
It's very true.
All right, boys, we're out of time for this week, but we will see you on the 101 brought to you by Lincoln Wallace next week.
Thanks for listening, guys.
Bye.
Oh,
Bye.
That's all right.
Bye.
I knew, Ralph.
oh well, you got